All right, now we're gonna do the second part of this setup, which is this volumetric explosion. Again, particles generating smoke behind them, some forces affecting them that we haven't used before. Lots to learn. So we want to copy our charge up because we're gonna use this emitter as the basis for the next one, so we don't have to redo everything completely from scratch at this point. So I'll just do Control D and just call it ns underscore release. Double click. We can close the charge up one, and let's name this F2 emitter underscore release. Let's pause it and just extend our timeline a little bit. Maybe set this to, 8 seconds. We don't need spawn rate anymore, so you can just delete that and then make a new spawn burst instantaneous. Let's give a birth to maybe 500 particles on frame 0. We can delete the point attraction force as well. So they're just born in place and then they disappear. So we need them to be born basically in the middle of our character because it sort of explodes out of the character. So shape location, let's make the sphere radius pretty small, so maybe just 20. And then we need to give them an initial explosive force, which basically just means a velocity going in all directions. And we want this to happen when they're born. So we are in the particle spawn group here. Just type velocity, add velocity, and let's change it to from point. So that's the one we haven't used yet. We've used linear and we've used in cone. We haven't used from point. Right? And now when I play this, they're just given a velocity from the middle of the scene going outwards. So that works perfectly for what we need. Let's give it more speed. So I'm thinking maybe 100. We need to give them some gravity so that they will actually fall to the ground. So particle update, just search for gravity force. And then we also want them to collide with the floor. So again, plus sign, collision, enter. And let's make them not bounce very much. So just maybe 0.15 and the friction I'll just set to 0.5. Let's see what that looks like in our scene. Drag our NS release over here. Move it to the middle of our character. And auto activate. Yeah, so they need way more force to really explode. It seems the gravity is just way too strong, I think. So let's set the gravity force to maybe just minus 500. And the velocity needs to be way stronger. So let's try maybe 400. That might be too much. Actually, that's not too bad. Yeah, so I think 400 actually works pretty well. It's just way too uniform. So once again, let's randomize some of these values. So velocity, speed, again, random range float anywhere from, let's say, 400 to 550, or maybe 300 to 500 instead. Okay, maybe just a touch more velocity. So 400 to 600, final decision. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. I think they could be alive for a bit longer. And maybe they can like die sooner when they hit the ground. So collision. And here we have the age for colliding particles, right? Advanced aging rate. This means that they will age faster after they've collided with the floor. So maybe we can just set it to 1. And what should happen is the particles that hit the ground just end up dying sooner than the ones that are in the air. Let's set it to 10 just to make sure that it's actually working. Yeah, so I just set it to 100 to make sure that it's working, and it is. So you can see the particles that hit the ground like die immediately. So I'll just set this to maybe 20. And if you get tired of switching back and forth, you can just unpin this window and just have it here on the side, right? So that might be really good to do right now, that we're just like constantly going back and forth looking at what stuff looks like in our scene over here. So I think they could be alive for a longer time, like I said before. So maybe minimum age 1.2, maximum age 1.5. Awesome. And finally, because they're sort of still flying out in a straight line, we can give them some curl noise just to break up their motion. So under particle update, you can just search for curl noise force. And let's give it a noise strength of maybe 100. It's a bit hard to see, but it affects them. So maybe set it to 500, maybe set it to 1000. Yeah, so now you can really see, you can see how the particles are now wiggling around as they're flying. So that will once again make it look a bit more random and cool once we add all the smoke trails. It's just not gonna be straight smoke trails, but these sort of swirly thingies flying around. So at this point, we're gonna add the smoke. So I'll just pin it back up here. Make sure that you're saving your work, save. And then we can right click, add emitter, parent emitters, grid 3D gas, master emitter. So we have that regular sphere source, which we don't need. So I will go under emitter, source, and we can turn off the sphere source. And instead we're gonna use the particle source. But we need to let Niagara know that we wanna use these particles as a source for the smoke. So we need to go to particle update and just search for set and set fluid source attributes. And now we can go back to the emitter summary emitter and just delete what's here and search for our emitter underscore release. Maybe just, shorten our timeline so that it's looping more. And it's not working, and that's because I forgot to make these a GPU particle simulation, right? So it's good for you to see this. Like I told you guys in the introductory videos, this has to be a GPU sim in order for it to emit smoke. So we need to set this to GPU. It's gonna give us that warning because it doesn't have fixed bounds. So set this to fixed, and here we go. Now it's emitting particles. So we can go to emitter summary, make this simulation box much bigger. So maybe 1500 by 1500 by, let's see how high it goes. Maybe just 600 over here. And it looks like it needs to be more toward the middle. So 0.4, let's try 0.3. Cool, let's see what it looks like in our scene. Okay, I need to light up the scene more. There's just not enough light covering everything. So move the spotlight higher, increase the strength, and increase the attenuation radius, increase the cone angle. So we actually have some light illuminating this. Again, cast, make sure that it's casting volumetric shadows. And here we go. So that's not looking bad at all. Let's make sure that the smoke is colliding with the floor. So emitter summary, collisions, uncheck open boundary -Z. Beautiful. And now really it's up to you what kind of a look you're going for. Here I think I have pink flames and blue smoke. So we can go to the render. We set blue smoke. And then we can set the render temperature to be a curve. And nothing's gonna show up because we're actually not emitting any fire yet. So under simulation, we need to enable temperature. Again, by default, this is gonna be way too hot and way too bright. So in our set fluid properties, we can set the temperature amount to maybe just 0.1. And the density can be lower as well, so maybe just 0.6. Stand our timeline, see how long it takes for the smoke to dissipate. Yeah, it's dissipating really slow. So dissipation rate for the density, we can set that to maybe 0.8. And I don't really want it to be rising up as much. So buoyancy for the smoke, let's just make it 0.2, which means slightly negative. I know it's confusing because a positive value means that the smoke actually goes down in this case. And the temperature buoyancy, we can just set to maybe 0.1. So the fire isn't rising up as much. And now back in our colors, let's just make the fire like a pinkish color, like we said. You can go for like a dark pink, so it's not too bright. Now let's also increase the resolution of our simulation, so make it maybe 350. Let's increase the pressure solver iterations to 12 to get better collisions. And let's enable the streaking to avoid any kind of gaps in the simulation. So enable streaking. I'm going over these pretty quickly right now because we've already covered them in the previous video. So if you are confused by anything, please make sure you're watching the course in order from the start. That's really how it's meant to be watched. So now if I go back to my scene over here, Hit G to hide all of the gizmos. Okay, so temperature is still too bright, but everything else is looking really nice. Beautiful collisions with the floor. Love the curl noise. So let's just make it a bit less bright. So temperature I'll just set to 0.05. We can also make the color a bit darker, right? If it's this just bright hot pink, it's gonna be too bright. So just drag it more toward the black here. And finally, we can hide the bounds. So simulation, uncheck, draw bounds. We just need some more lights to light up this smoke nicer and make it look a bit more volumetric. So again, I'm not gonna spend too much time on the lighting. I trust you guys to, you know, play with the lighting and make whatever fantasy scene you're working on. Maybe just like one more light illuminating the smoke. Hit G to hide all of the gizmos and auto activate. And here we go. Very, very close, I think, to what I originally had over here. You know, don't be afraid to crank up the amount of particles if you want. So we can go to burst instantaneous and just, let's do 1,000 particles and see what it looks like. It may be too much, but maybe not. So auto activate again. Yeah, some beautiful detail. That's probably too many particles, but just so you know, you can crank up the values pretty high and it's still gonna be real time. Very, very fast to work with. So in the final video of this effect, we are going to add the third element, which are these little ember sparks particles flying around. And I will also show you how to time it all together with the sequencer, so that our character here will actually animate and charge up and then everything happens in order. So I'll see you in the next video for that.